This is James Bulger. Beside him is 10-year-old John Venables. Security cameras captured this moment inside a shopping center in 1993. A moment that would later become one of the most disturbing images in British criminal history. This was the last time James was seen alive. If this is your first time visiting the channel, welcome. Here we explore real, true crime cases with respect, clarity, and a focus on understanding what really happened. February 12, 1993 began like any other winter day in Liverpool. The city moved at its usual pace, with families going about their routines and shoppers filling public spaces. Inside the New Strand shopping center in Bootle, the atmosphere was ordinary and calm. People browsed stores, parents managed errands, and children walked alongside adults, surrounded by noise, movement, and familiarity. Among them was James Bulger, a 2-year-old spending the day with his mother. Nothing about the morning suggested that it would later become one of the most discussed days in British criminal history. Like many parents, James's mother was focused on everyday tasks, navigating a busy shopping environment where moments pass quickly and attention is divided. At some point during their visit, James became separated from his mother. The moment itself was brief, lasting only minutes, but its consequences would be permanent. In a place designed for safety and routine, something quietly went wrong. What makes this case different from many others is that parts of that afternoon were recorded. Security cameras inside the New Strand shopping center captured James being approached by 2 older boys. The footage shows them walking together through public areas, blending into the crowd. To anyone passing by, nothing appeared unusual. There was no visible struggle, no raised voices, no immediate sign that help was needed. This is one of the most unsettling aspects of the case, how ordinary it looked. The cameras continued to record as the 3 moved through the shopping center and beyond. Adults passed them, people glanced in their direction and kept walking. No one realized that a child was being led away from his family. In real time, there was no context, no alarm, just another group moving through a public space. At that moment, no one knew a crime was unfolding. The CCTV system was not being actively monitored as it might be today. The cameras existed mainly to record incidents after they occurred, not to prevent them in the moment. The footage would only become significant later when police began piecing together what had happened. Meanwhile, James's mother noticed he was missing. What began as confusion quickly turned into fear. She searched nearby areas, retracing her steps, asking for help. Staff inside the shopping center were alerted, and an urgent search began almost immediately. Security, employees, and members of the public joined in, checking shops, corridors, and exits. Announcements were made. Every minute mattered. But at that point, no one knew where to look. The shopping center, once a place of routine, became the center of growing concern. Police were contacted, and the situation shifted from a missing child within a building to a much more serious concern. Officers arrived and began coordinating efforts, knowing that time was critical. Unseen by everyone involved in the search, the answers were already recorded, stored quietly on videotapes, waiting to be reviewed. That day did not begin with violence or chaos. It began with normal life, familiar surroundings, and a false sense of safety. And that is why it remains so important to understand how quickly ordinary moments can change, and how crucial awareness, systems, and prevention truly are.
Before this case became a national conversation, James Bulger was simply a young child growing up in a loving family. He was 2 years old at the time of his death, an age defined by curiosity, movement, and learning the world through everyday experiences. To his family, he was not a name in the news, but a son, a source of joy, and a presence woven into daily life. James lived with his parents in the Liverpool area. Like many toddlers, he was at a stage where independence was beginning to show in small ways, walking confidently, exploring his surroundings, and responding to the world with trust. Those who knew him described him as an ordinary child in the best sense of the word, surrounded by care and familiarity. Understanding who James was is important because cases involving children can sometimes lose their human focus when they become widely discussed. This story is not about footage or headlines first. It is about a life that mattered from the very beginning. On the day he disappeared, James was doing something entirely normal for a child his age, spending time with his parent in a public place. There was nothing risky or unusual about this. His presence in the shopping center reflected the everyday reality of families moving through shared spaces together. James did not have the ability to recognize danger or understand intention. Like all young children, he relied completely on the adults and systems around him for protection. That dependence is central to why this case resonated so deeply with the public. It highlighted how vulnerable young children are, even in places that feel safe. Remembering James as a person, not just as a case, is essential. His name is remembered today not because of what happened to him, but because his story led to lasting changes in awareness, responsibility, and child protection. With that understanding, the focus now shifts back to the critical hours that followed, when James was officially reported missing and an urgent search began to unfold.
Every case you see here is carefully investigated, reconstructed, and told without distractions. Subscribing gives you early access to new cases, deeper breakdowns, and stories that demand attention. This isn't entertainment. This is understanding what really happened.
The moment James was confirmed missing, the atmosphere inside the shopping center changed completely. What had been an ordinary afternoon suddenly became a race against time. His mother alerted staff immediately, and within minutes, security procedures were put into action. People who had been shopping moments earlier began helping to search, checking corridors, entrances, and nearby stores. For a short time, there was still hope that James had simply wandered off and would be found nearby. This is common in cases involving very young children, and early searches often focus on retracing steps and checking familiar areas. Announcements were made, and staff remained alert, watching for any sign of him. As minutes passed without success, concern deepened. The search expanded beyond individual stores to include exits and surrounding walkways. Security teams began reviewing initial information while coordinating with police. The situation was no longer a routine missing child alert. It was becoming something far more serious. Police officers arrived quickly and began organizing a formal response. They spoke with family members, gathered descriptions, and secured key areas. Time was critical, and every decision mattered. Officers understood that in cases involving young children, the first few hours are often the most important. At this stage, there was very little information to work with. No witnesses had reported seeing anything unusual, and there was no immediate indication of where James might have gone. The shopping center was busy, and people moved in and out constantly, making the situation even more challenging. Behind the scenes, attention began to turn towards security recordings. Although CCTV footage was not instantly reviewed as it might be today, investigators recognized that the cameras could hold important clues. This marked a turning point from searching blindly to searching with purpose. As officers began examining evidence and reviewing security footage, the investigation entered a crucial phase, one that would soon reveal how James had vanished in plain sight. With the search efforts underway, investigators turned their focus to evidence that could explain how James disappeared so quickly from a crowded public space. One of the most important resources available was the shopping center's CCTV system. Although reviewing footage in the early 1990s was a slow, manual process, officers understood its potential value. Teams began carefully watching hours of recorded video, moving frame by frame through different camera angles. The goal was simple but urgent: identify the last confirmed sighting of James and trace his movements afterward. This required patience, attention to detail, and coordination across multiple locations. As the footage was reviewed, a critical moment emerged. Investigators saw James being led through the shopping center by two older boys. The images showed them walking calmly among other shoppers, passing adults without drawing attention. Nothing in the footage appeared dramatic, which made the discovery even more unsettling. This finding changed the direction of the case immediately. What had been a search for a lost child became a focused criminal investigation. Police began isolating relevant clips, creating still images, and mapping the route captured by the cameras. Recognizing the importance of public assistance, investigators prepared to release selected images, hoping someone would recognize the boys and help identify them. With clear images and a defined timeline, the investigation moved rapidly toward identifying those responsible and bringing the case to a decisive conclusion.
As the investigation progressed, police were able to identify the individuals seen with James in the CCTV footage. The suspects were two boys, both 10 years old, from the Liverpool area. Their names and identities were handled with care by authorities and the media, given their age, to ensure legal protections and avoid public harm. The two boys knew each other casually. They were friends in the local community, though not close companions. On the day in question, they encountered James in the shopping center purely by chance. James had no prior connection to them. He was simply a toddler in a public place. This lack of relationship is a key aspect of the case, highlighting how random circumstances in ordinary environments can lead to unforeseen events. Investigators carefully studied the CCTV footage, noting the movements of the boys and how James followed them. The images captured them walking calmly through public areas, passing adults who did not recognize anything unusual. This ordinary appearance made the situation more complex, as there were no witnesses initially aware that anything concerning had occurred. Through the footage and community information, police were able to trace the boys' route and identify their homes. The investigation also looked into their backgrounds, friendships, and daily routines to understand how these two children came to be involved in such a serious incident. Understanding who the suspects were and how they came into contact with James created a clear link in the chain of events. This insight laid the foundation for the next stage, the arrests and the process of establishing accountability, which would ultimately bring clarity to a case that had captivated the nation. Once the suspects were identified, police acted promptly. Due to their young age, the authorities approached the situation with caution, ensuring that legal procedures were followed and the rights of the children were respected. Officers visited their homes and took them into custody, marking a critical turning point in the investigation.
The CCTV evidence had provided a clear record of the events, and when combined with other investigative findings, it formed the core of the case. The images and timeline allowed investigators to understand exactly how James had been led away and who was responsible. At this stage, the focus shifted from searching for answers to preparing a formal legal process. Because the suspects were only 10 years old, the case required special legal handling. The court had to balance accountability with the recognition that children have limited understanding of the consequences of their actions. The trial concluded that the two boys were responsible, and the court implemented measures intended to provide supervision, rehabilitation, and protection for society. This stage of the case not only delivered resolution, but also prompted a broader reflection across the country. It highlighted the role of evidence, the responsibilities of guardians and communities, and the need for laws to address serious acts committed by minors. With responsibility established, the nation began to consider the lasting impact of this case on families, communities, and the legal system.